In the 1960s, the prevailing view was that all variation in behaviour was due to environmental factors, and the idea that there might be any genetic involvement at all was hotly contested. And this is actually what drove me into the subject, because it seemed to me it's so variance with what was obviously going on. All the focus in the past on asthma was, oh, well, it's all, just due to cat's fur and house dust mite and blah, blah, blah. And you say, well, yeah, sure, but everyone is exposed to house dust mite and everyone's exposed to, how come only some people get it? And the answer is because of genes, because of genetic differences, but they won't be huge single major genes. It's actually the cumulative effects of large numbers of genes of small effects that are important. And that's what's accounting for the overwhelming load of complex disease. Heart disease or cancers or neurologic diseases, autoimmune diseases, all of them are in this category. I think the group we've built here in complex trait genetics is really seen as one of the top groups in the world. There's now this global acceptance of the role of genetics, which 40 years ago you would have found people denying, and now that's completely turned around, and I think we've played quite a role in that. If you want to fix a disease, if you fix a condition, then you need an exact understanding of what's wrong, and I see that as our primary role. Twins do provide us with this natural experiment. I mean, comparing the similarity of identical twins who share all their genes in common, 100%, with non-identical twins who on average share 50% of their genes in common. A little bit of algebra, you can actually then calculate the relative proportions of variation due to genes and to environment. And so that's the way that the method works. It's the most beautiful natural experiment that has been given to us. And so I just rode that as hard as I could, and I still am riding it actually. Okay. So I started the Australian Twin Registry in 1978, and that enabled us to make really firm statements about genetic contributions to personality, educational achievement, and how much you drink and how much you smoke, and increasingly got into psychiatry, particularly anxiety and depression, and that still is a major theme of what we do here. With the adolescent twins, the 12-year-old, that was the quite separate Brisbane longitudinal twin study that I began here in 1992 to find out that the number of moles on your body is about 80% genetic. And then furthermore showing that those genes involved in mole development are the same genes as involved, with one exception, the same genes as involved in melanoma. It meant that we've now got a much stronger idea of the genetics of melanoma. So we started a study on one thing, and I think, we could also study, with only just a little bit more work, we could, and not troubling the twins too much, we could ask about this and about this. And so my studies tend to sort of mushroom. That's just meant that we have been able to contribute to so many different fields from the same studies. I give myself a bit of credit for realising that we were heading towards DNA molecular stuff early on, so we started collecting DNA on all our subjects. No one was doing it up to that time. But because we started collecting DNA so early, it meant that when the GWAS revolution came along in the early 2000s, we were ahead of the game in having huge collections already. And so we were, we're some of the first to jump in on the big GWAS studies. This whole revolution in genome-wide association studies has actually changed the whole thing.
One of the big advances in knowledge around genetics has been around just how complex human behaviours and many human diseases are. If you sort of go back 15 years, there was still a strong commentary about whether a disease might be influenced by, 2 genes or 5 genes or 10 genes. These days, we're having the same conversations, but we're now talking about thousands of genetic variants that are having an important impact on a condition.
The other thing that's become apparent in the last 15 years is that these studies need to be done on a very large scale. We didn't actually find our first gene for depression until we were up to about 60,000 people or something like that. And now we've just published the latest papers, I think 700,000 people or something like that.
So yeah, I'm really proud of a lot of the work that we've done here in the Institute. We've played a major part in sort of gene discovery, both in mental health, but across a wide range of other diseases and disorders. And we've started some things that have really, really grown and evolved. And one of those is the work that we've done with the Enigma Consortium. It started out of just a collaboration between 2 or 3 groups, and we're looking at can we find genetic influences that influence brain structure and function. Fast forward that 15 years, we now have 1,000 people working in that consortium. It goes across more than 50 countries and involves thousands of researchers and thousands of participants. And it's making a really sort of meaningful difference in our knowledge around the brain and how it works.
And the work on mental health, I think, has been really important because, I mean, everyone now recognises that there are genetic components in these, and as I say, I hope eventually that will lead to new treatments. But even without that, even just at this point, I think it's important because it's changed the whole discourse about these things.
What we've been able to show through our work is that actually there's a large biological contribution. So environment is important, family is important, but biology is important as well. Something like ADHD is exactly the same type of genetic heritability as asthma. So they are just as heritable as each other. But we don't blame people for having asthma. We don't stigmatize people for having asthma. And that's not always the experience of people with ADHD. So being able to share that knowledge and, improve that understanding of what causes and how things can contribute to these conditions can be really important.